My name is Theodore Mast. I'm 58 years old, and for 30 years I have never once told my daughter no when it mattered. Not when she changed her major twice, not when she moved across the country without warning, not even when she married a man I had real doubts about. I'm telling you this because what happened at our housewarming party is the one time in my life every nerve in my body told me to make a scene. And instead, I picked up my wife's coat, helped her into it, and walked out of my daughter's new house without saying a single word to anyone. My son-in-law thought he'd won something that night. He had no idea what was already in motion. Before I go further, hit subscribe and drop your state and the time where you're watching from. It helps more than you'd think. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without the foundation under it. I spent 34 years in commercial insurance, the last 19 of them running my own agency out of a strip mall in Lancaster, Ohio. The kind of place with a dry cleaner on one side and a tax office on the other. Nothing glamorous. I built that book of business one handshake at a time, insuring barns and bowling alleys and small manufacturing shops. The kind of clients who call you on a Sunday because a pipe burst and they don't know who else to trust. My wife Susan is 56. We met at a 4-H fundraiser in 1993. And on our second date, I drove an hour and 40 minutes each way because she'd mentioned she missed the pie at a diner near where she grew up. We've been married 29 years. She taught piano lessons out of our living room for over 2 decades, has a laugh you can hear through 2 closed doors, and in all that time I have never once heard her say an unkind word about another person in front of me, not even the ones who deserved it. Our daughter Haley is 28. She's sharp, ambitious, finished her MBA 2 years ago, and now works in brand strategy for a marketing firm downtown. I was prouder of her the day she got that job than I was, the day she walked across the stage at graduation. I helped her when I could, not with money in any way she'd ever see on a bank statement, but with introductions, with sitting on the phone for an hour, when she needed to think out loud, with showing up. I learned a long time ago to pick my battles with Haley, and that policy started the year she turned 23. She'd gotten involved with an investment that smelled wrong to me from the first conversation. I said so, directly, the way my own father would have said it to me. She didn't call me for 2.5 months. When she finally did call again, there was something already built into her voice, this small flinch before she spoke, like she was bracing for the next thing I might say. She'd second-guess herself out loud sometimes at the dinner table, glancing at me first, like she was asking permission to have an opinion. That was the part I could never quite let go of. Not what came later, what I'd already done to her ease around me, just by being right too many times in the wrong tone. So when Haley called to tell us she and Cole were engaged, Susan cried happy tears into the phone and started planning a celebration dinner before she'd even hung up. I sat out on the back steps for a while, before I went back inside. 2 days after that, my old college roommate, Pete Aldrich, called to check in. The way he does every few months whether anything's going on or not. He'd heard about the engagement secondhand. "You sound far away, Ted," he said. I told him I was fine, just thinking. Thinking about what? Whether I've been patient with her, or whether I've just been quiet. I'm not always sure those are the same thing. Pete didn't say anything for a second, then, "Ask me again after the wedding." I told him I would. Cole Render is the kind of man who shakes your hand a half-second too long, and calls it confidence. His family runs 3 car dealerships across 2 counties, the kind of local money that gets a building named after it eventually. His mother, Patricia, has a way of saying your name like she's reading it off a list of people she's doing a favor for. The engagement party was at a private room in a steakhouse downtown, white tablecloths, a guy in a vest pouring wine. He clearly thought we couldn't tell apart from anything cheaper. The invitation came 4 days before the event. A printed card slid under our door with no call, no email first. Susan set it on the kitchen counter and didn't say anything about it, which from Susan is its own kind of statement. We went, of course. You go. Patricia met us near the entrance in a dress that cost more than my first truck and introduced us to 4 different couples in 10 minutes. Getting our last name wrong twice, not out of malice, just because she hadn't bothered to learn it. Our table was near the kitchen doors. Every time a tray went through the pass-through, you felt the swing of it in your chair. During the toasts, Cole's father spoke for almost 10 minutes about the Render family legacy, about the new dealership opening in the spring, about the kind of future his son was building. He mentioned Haley twice, warmly. He never mentioned us. Later in the evening, Cole came by our table, set his hand on my shoulder for exactly as long as a photographer might want it there, and said, "Glad you guys could make it out, the way you'd thank a neighbor for watering your plants." I excused myself to find the restroom. On the way back, I passed an alcove where Patricia was talking low to one of her friends. Well, at least Cole's marrying up in ambition, even if not exactly in polish. The father seems like he never left the insurance counter. I stood there a second, then straightened my jacket and walked back to the table. I didn't tell Susan what I'd heard. I just found her hand under the tablecloth and held it for the rest of the night. But I remembered every word of it, the way you remember the exact temperature of water that burned you. 4 months before the wedding, the venue's lighting contractor backed out 2 weeks before a deadline. Some licensing issue nobody caught in time. Haley called me on a Tuesday night, her voice tight in a way I hadn't heard from her since she was a teenager calling about a flat tire on the highway. She needed somebody who could get a crew in fast, somebody who actually knew electrical contractors, and not just people who claimed to. I made calls. I had a guy I'd insured for 12 years who owed me more favors than he'd ever admit out loud. 3 days later, the lighting was up, better than what they'd originally booked, and nobody but Haley and me knew where it came from. No invoice, no mention. 2 weeks after that, Haley called again, different tone entirely. "Dad, Cole found out you handled the lighting thing." "Found out what, exactly? That I helped fix a problem you called me about?" "He feels like you went around him, like you're trying to make yourself necessary in this." I let that sit for a second before I answered. "Haley, you called me." "I know, Dad, I know you helped, but Cole feels like..." And there it was, that careful flatness in her voice, a woman reading lines she didn't fully believe. "Can you just back off, please? At least until after the wedding." "All right," I said. "I'll back off." I hung up and sat by the kitchen window for a long while. Susan didn't ask what was wrong, and I didn't explain. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something slower and heavier than that, the kind of grief you don't notice creeping in until you're already standing in the middle of it. That same week, Pete called out of nowhere again. "Just checking on you," he said. He'd heard the wedding was getting close. "You sound tired, Ted." "Ask me after the wedding, Pete. You said that already. I know I did." The wedding itself, I'll be honest, went better than I expected. Cole's family ran the show, naturally, but Haley looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way that made most of the smaller insults easier to swallow. Susan cried through the ceremony the way she does at everything, and for a few months after, things were almost easy between us and Haley. We had her and Cole over for dinner twice. Susan started a small quilt she planned to give them for their first anniversary. I told myself the hard part was behind us. Then, 8 months after the wedding, Haley and Cole bought their first house, a 4-bedroom out near the new development by the reservoir. The kind of house that costs more than what I made my entire first decade in the insurance business. They planned a housewarming party for early October. 60-70 people, Haley told us on the phone, mostly Cole's side and people from her office. "I really want you and Mom there for the start of it," she said, "before it gets too crowded." I told her we wouldn't miss it. Susan spent 2 weeks deciding what to bring, not because it needed to be complicated, but because that's who she is. She finally landed on a cast-iron Dutch oven, the good kind, the kind that gets passed down, wrapped in a dish towel she'd embroidered herself with a little house and the date. She'd been up late 3 nights in a row finishing the stitching. The morning of the party, she stood in front of the hallway mirror in a soft green dress she'd bought specifically for the occasion. The box still up in the closet for a week, before she finally cut the tags. "Do I look all right?" she asked me, the same question she's asked before every recital, every holiday dinner, every moment that mattered for 29 years. I told her she looked like the woman I drove an hour and 40 minutes to take to a diner for pie. She smiled, and then the smile thinned out at the edges, the way it does when she's working hard to believe something. "Promise me today goes okay, Ted." I told her I'd be right there with her, whatever happened. It wasn't exactly what she'd asked for, and she knew it, but she nodded anyway. Before we left the house, I sent a short text to Pete. "If I call you today, pick up." His answer came back in under a minute. "Always will." The new development was about 25 minutes from our place, all wide driveways and houses that looked freshly unwrapped. We could hear the party from the street, music and laughter spilling out past the yard, already crowded with cars. When we pulled up, I saw Cole near the front walk talking to a cluster of men in golf polos, and I saw Patricia just past him, holding a glass of white wine, watching us get out of the car, the way you watch weather rolling in that you'd rather not deal with. 60 or 70 people fill a backyard differently than you'd think. It isn't just the noise. It's the weight of all those eyes, even the ones not looking directly at you, that you can still feel anyway. String lights ran across the patio in long loops, and somewhere near the back a portable speaker was playing something upbeat that nobody was quite dancing to yet. Susan held the wrapped Dutch oven against her chest, like it might get away from her, and I kept my hand light on her back as we walked up the driveway. Haley met us near the gate, hugged her mother first, then me, quick and a little distracted, already half turned toward someone calling her name from the patio. "You guys made it great. The food's just getting set up. Go grab a drink. I'll find you in a few." And then she was gone into the crowd, swallowed up by it before Susan even had the chance to hand her the gift. We found a spot near the edge of the patio, not quite inside the main cluster of people, not quite outside it either. Nobody approached us for the first 15 minutes, except a caterer asking if we wanted a drink. Susan held the Dutch oven a while longer, looking for the right moment, the right person to hand it to, before finally setting it on the gift table herself, tucked between a gift bag from a department store and a bottle of wine with a bow on it. She came back over to me and didn't say anything, just stood a little closer than usual. About 40 minutes in, Patricia found us near the drinks table. "Theodore, Susan, so glad you could make the trip out." She said the trip like we'd come from another state instead of 25 minutes away. She introduced us to a couple standing nearby as Haley's folks from out near Lancaster, in a tone that made it sound like an apology for something. The couple nodded politely and went back to their conversation within 10 seconds. Around the time the sun started going down and somebody turned the string lights on, I went looking for the bathroom inside the house. On my way back through the hallway, I passed the kitchen, where I could hear Patricia's voice through the doorway. Not loud, but not quiet enough either. Honestly, between us, I don't know what Haley's mother was thinking with that dress. Bless her heart, it's a little much for a backyard party. And that pot, who even brings a Dutch oven to a housewarming anymore? It's sweet, I suppose. Very small town of her. Another woman laughed, not unkindly exactly, just easily. The way you laugh at something you've already decided is harmless to laugh at. I stood in that hallway for a second, then I straightened my jacket, the way I always seem to do in those moments. Like, it's the only thing I know to do with my hands, and I walked back outside. I didn't tell Susan. I just found her by the food table and stood next to her, close enough that our shoulders touched, and I didn't let go of that closeness for a long while. It was maybe an hour later, full dark by then, the party at its loudest, when it happened. Susan had gone to find Haley to ask, gently, sweetly, in the exact way only Susan can ask something like this, if the Dutch oven had made it inside okay, if maybe they'd want to use it for the chili Haley used to love as a kid. She found Haley near the back porch steps, and Cole was standing right there with her, a drink in his hand, talking to two of his buddies from the dealership. I wasn't close enough to hear all of it. I was maybe 20 feet away, getting a refill on iced tea, when I heard Susan's voice rise, not loud, just startled, and I turned in time to see Cole step toward her, his face doing something ugly and quick, and I heard him say it clear enough that 3 or 4 people nearby stopped their own conversations to listen. "Can you and your husband just relax and let us enjoy our own party? Nobody invited you to make this about your old Dutch oven and your feelings, Susan. We get it, you raised her. You can let go now." He said it loud enough and flat enough that it landed in the yard like something dropped from a height. Susan didn't say anything back. She just stood there with her hand half raised, like she'd been about to touch his arm to calm things down before he got there first. A few people near them went quiet. Somebody's laugh died out mid-syllable. I crossed that 20 feet faster than I think I've moved in 10 years. By the time I got to her, Susan's eyes were wet, not crying exactly, just that bright, overfull look she gets when she's trying very hard not to let something show. Haley was standing right there, 2 feet from her own husband, and she said nothing. Not Cole, that's not okay. Not Mom, are you all right? Nothing. She looked at the ground near her shoes, like there was something there worth studying. I didn't raise my voice. I want to be honest about that, because for one full second, every instinct in me wanted to plant my hand square in the middle of that young man's chest and ask him exactly what he thought he was talking to. But I didn't. I put my arm around Susan's shoulders, and I looked at Cole for a moment, long enough that his went quiet too, and I said, "We'll get out of your way." That was all. Then I looked at my daughter. She still hadn't looked up. I waited 2 seconds, maybe 3, the longest 3 seconds of that whole year, for her to say something, anything, and she didn't. I walked Susan back across that crowded yard, past the string lights, and the speaker still playing something nobody was dancing to, past Patricia, who had the decency to at least look briefly uncomfortable, and out to the car. I opened her door first, helped her in, the way I have for 29 years, and then I walked around and got in myself. We sat in the driveway for a minute before I started the engine. Susan finally said, very quietly, "I just wanted to know about the pot." I told her I knew. I told her none of it was about the pot. We didn't talk much on the drive home. Somewhere around the county line, I picked up my phone at a stoplight and called Pete. He picked up on the first ring, the way he said he would. "It's time," I told him. "All right," he said. "Tell me what you need." What I need to explain now is something that goes back almost 2 years. Something I never told Haley, never told Susan the full shape of either, until much later. When Cole and Haley were first getting serious, before the engagement even, Cole came to me privately, more than once, asking for help getting into the dealership business his own father ran. Not money exactly, but guidance, the kind of thing a future father-in-law might offer if he liked you enough to bother. I'd done some of my agency's commercial work for small auto lots over the years, knew the insurance side of that business cold, knew which lenders were reasonable, and which ones would eat a young guy alive on his first big loan. I helped him put together the financial picture that got him a stake in a 4th dealership his father was opening 2 towns over, a stake that was, on paper, entirely his own accomplishment. Nobody at that party, not Patricia, not Cole's father, knew how much of that early groundwork ran through me, through favors and contacts I'd spent 3 decades building, and was, frankly, not particularly attached to spending on a man who'd just told my wife to let go of her own daughter in front of 70 people. Pete Aldrich, the friend I'd called, isn't just an old roommate. He's a regional underwriter for one of the largest commercial lenders in the state. The same lender holding the note on that 4th dealership. I'd never once used that connection to my advantage, not in 20 years of knowing him, because that's not who I am. But I also never had a reason to. I'm not going to pretend what happened next was some grand act of revenge, because honestly, it wasn't designed that way at all. I made one phone call to Pete, and what I asked for wasn't punishment. I asked him to simply, quietly, do his job the way he was supposed to do it from the start, which was to take a second, careful look at the financial documentation on that 4th dealership's loan. The documentation that, as it turned out, Cole's father had pushed through faster than it should have gone, cutting a few corners nobody at the bank had caught the first time around. Corners I happened to know about because I'd seen the original numbers before certain figures got rounded up in the version that went to underwriting. I want to be clear because this part matters. I didn't fabricate anything. I didn't lie to Pete or ask him to bend a single rule. I told him what I knew to be true, showed him what I still had in my own files from when I'd helped put the early numbers together, and let the bank's own process do the rest. 3 weeks after the housewarming party, the loan on the 4th dealership got pulled back for review. A month after that, the discrepancies were confirmed. Nothing criminal, nothing that would land anyone in real legal trouble, but enough that Cole's father had to personally guarantee the gap out of pocket. Enough that the opening got delayed 5 months. Enough that the cushion Cole had been promised, the income that was supposed to make him equal to his own family's name at last, didn't show up the way everyone assumed it would. I never told Haley what I'd done. I still haven't, not directly. But word travels in families, the way water finds the low ground, and within 2 months, she knew enough of it to call me on a Thursday night, her voice different than I'd heard it in years. Not angry, just stripped down to something honest. "Did you have something to do with the dealership thing, Dad?" I didn't lie to her. I told her I'd made one phone call to an old friend and asked him to look closely at something he should have looked closely at in the first place. That was all I said. She was quiet for a long time on the other end. Then she said, "Cole's been different since it happened. Quieter. He apologized to me about that night at the party. I don't think he even remembered exactly what he said until I made him say it back to me. I told her I was glad to hear it, and I meant that, every word." It took another 4 months before Haley came to see us on her own. No Cole, just her, sitting at our kitchen table, where she used to do her homework, turning a coffee mug slowly between her hands the way she does when she's working up to something. "I should have said something that night," she finally told us. I saw Mom's face and I just froze. I've replayed it so many times since. I kept telling myself I'd make it right later, and later kept getting further away. Susan reached over and put her hand flat on the table, not quite touching Haley's, just close enough. We know, sweetheart. I don't think I really understood what I owed you both until I watched you walk away that night without making a single scene. I expected you to yell. I think some part of me almost wanted you to, so I wouldn't have to feel like the only one who'd done something wrong. I told her that walking out wasn't me giving up on her. It was me finally being honest about what I would and wouldn't stand by and watch happen to her mother, even from her own husband, even in her own backyard. Cole came to see me alone about 6 weeks after that, on a Saturday morning. No Haley, no Patricia, just him standing on our front porch looking like a much younger man than the one who'd stood in that backyard with a drink in his hand. He apologized plainly, without the kind of performance I half expected from him. He said the months since the dealership delay had been the hardest stretch of his adult life. Watching his father's temper, watching the cushion he'd been counting on disappear, and somewhere in the middle of all that pressure he'd had to actually sit and think about why he'd said what he said to Susan in the first place. I think I was scared, he told me, which was about the most honest sentence I'd ever heard out of him. Scared that if I didn't draw some kind of line, I'd never really be the man of my own house. I drew it in the worst possible direction, at the worst possible person. I didn't tell him it was fine, because it wasn't, not entirely, not yet. I told him I appreciated him saying it to my face instead of through Haley. These days, almost a year on from that party, things look different than I expected, but not worse, maybe even better in the ways that count. Haley and Cole still have us over, but it's a quieter kind of together now, not performance. Just Sunday dinners where Susan brings that same Dutch oven, still wrapped in the towel she embroidered, because it's become a kind of running joke between them now. The pot that started the whole reckoning. Cole asks me real questions about the insurance business these days, the kind a man asks when he's actually trying to learn something, instead of trying to look like he already knows it. The dealership opened eventually, 5 months late, smaller than originally planned, but standing on ground that's actually solid this time, which matters more to me than anyone in that family will probably ever fully understand. Pete and I still talk every few weeks, mostly about nothing, the way old friends do once the thing that needed doing has already been done. Last Sunday, Susan stood at the stove, stirring that same chili in that same Dutch oven, and Haley sat on the counter the way she used to as a teenager, swinging her feet, watching her mother's hands move. "You think we're going to be okay, all of us?" she asked. Not really to anyone in particular. Susan looked over at me before she answered. "I think we're already most of the way there," she said. "Good enough for now?" I asked. Haley smiled, the real kind, not the careful one she used to wear at our dinner table. "Good enough for now," she said. I sat on the back porch that evening, with my coffee going lukewarm in my hand, listening to the two of them laugh about something through the screen door, and I thought about 34 years of foundations, of barns and bowling alleys and bank loans, and a marriage and a daughter, and how the strongest ones are never the ones that never crack, just the ones you're willing to go back and repair. Slowly, honestly, one Sunday at a time. If you've stayed with me this far, and you've ever been the one standing quietly at the edge of someone else's party, absorbing more than you should have to, just to keep the peace, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not required to make yourself smaller to keep someone else comfortable, not even your own child, not even surrounded by 70 people in a backyard who'll forget your name by morning. Walking away is not surrender. Telling someone the truth, quietly and only once, is not the same as holding a grudge. My name is Theodore Mast, and I am still Haley's father. We have Sunday dinners now. The chili's better than it used to be. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs permission to draw a line they've been afraid to draw. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place? There are more stories like this one waiting for you. I'll see you in the next one.